Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel called zuzanareacts, where I learn all things Bharat with your help, and I just share my Slovak Central European point of view. And today we are going to look into a requested video and a spiritual video which I'm quite excited about, which is Hinduism for beginners. Now I've done a number of spiritual videos, and I'm very curious to see what is Hinduism for beginners as discussed on the Ranveer show. But before we get into today's video,
please like this video and click on the subscribe button and turn on the notification. Thank you so much for your support.
all right, let's kick this off. And I'm going to do it in part 1 and 2 because this is like an hour long video. So I'm just going to split it. And I say, let's go.
Swami Purna Chaitanya, welcome to TRS.
Pleasure to be here.
Are you ready for me to trauma dump on you?
We'll only one way to find out.
Whenever these spiritual podcasts visit my life, I usually need them to visit my life at that point, and I take something away from it. So I welcome conversations like this into my existence. Firstly, thank you for being in my house. Thank you for being in front of me. Thank you for your presence.
It's a pleasure.
How are you, sir?
I'm great. I feel great.
I have a lot of questions for you.
Bring it on.
It's a lot of personal questions, but maybe just so that the audience gets a little context, I'd love to know your Dutch name as well. I'd love to know about your story. I'd love to know how you're 25% Punjabi. So just break that down for the audiences before we dive deep into this spiritual conversation.
So I was born and brought up in the Netherlands, mostly in a place called Haarlem, which is near Amsterdam. My mother was half Indian. So her father was from India. She was born in Delhi, and he was originally from Punjab. He came when the partition happened, when Pakistan became separate from India. He, with his brothers and sisters and his mother, came all the way to Delhi, built a life for them there. And at some point, he got this interesting idea to come to the Netherlands for some time to learn how to make dairy products like cheese and baby food. And that is where he met my grandmother in a train. Somehow they got connected. Long story short, at some point they got married. She came to India with him. My mother and her brother were born there. But then when she was young, she came back to Netherlands with her mother. So she grew up there in the Netherlands mostly. She didn't speak any Hindi or things like that. But that makes her half Indian. And then when I was born, that makes me 25% because my dad was definitely Dutch. And then the name they gave me was Alexander. So that is the name I've used a big part of my life.
How do you explain to your friends in the West about what you do now? Or more specifically, how do you explain Sanatan Dharma, Hinduism, Shiva, these concepts, mantras to your friends back home? Have you ever tried?
Yeah. I'm nowadays, I've spent the last 2 years more in Europe, and I've actually done like big tours like Netherlands, UK, Denmark, Germany, so many places where I even conducted master classes on, say, mantras or secrets of karma, all these kind of topics.
Imagine I'm someone who's born and raised in Europe and I've never heard of these things. How do you explain all these things to me? Because my only perception of God is what I have heard since childhood. I've never even heard of Shiva, hypothetically speaking. Because the thing is, when you grow up in India, you take these things for granted. Oh yeah, Shiva. Oh yeah, Vishnu. Oh yeah, mantras. Yeah, we know that. That's because you're born in this culture. What about the people outside? How do you explain the 101 of this?
So for example, when you talk about Shiva or any devata, how I introduce it, that I say that I tell them a little bit about the rishis, that in India, ancient times, they had sages, saints, who went into a deep state of meditation where their intuition became so clear that by taking their attention to something, the knowledge of that would unfold itself. And then I tell them, of course, this sounds a little abstract, but to give an example, we have these scriptures on astrology, astronomy, Ayurveda, so much, where we have practical knowledge, where, for example, they spoke about the different moons of Saturn, even though our modern telescopes have only been able to physically confirm or perceive that in the last few decades. But then they realized that whatever was written in these scriptures is spot on, it's correct. They spoke about the world being round thousands of years ago. No, Bhugol. Even if you see some of these statues and descriptions where the Varaha avatar, where Vishnu lifted the earth from the waters, this earth was round. And in the West, they only found out a few hundred years ago when you keep sailing and you don't fall off. Sounds very bad to put it like that, but to put it bluntly. So they had this knowledge of Ayurveda, of so many things, but that knowledge was downloaded, you can say, from the universal consciousness, or it was intuitive knowledge. And so I said that they had this knowledge of how to go deep into meditation, to clear their mind to such an extent that they were able to tap into that. And then when we talk about mantras and devatas, I said that so many different types of mantras. The knowledge of mantras also came from the rishis, and to such an extent that the definition of the word rishi is a mantra drashta. No, it's one who has seen the mantra, who has perceived the mantra. It's not a mantra karta. It's not the one who has created it. So, like how we had, people know this story maybe from school, Newton, and the law of gravity, where he was sitting on a tree, one apple fell, and he figured out. So, Newton did not see something fall for the first time. Things keep falling all the time, even apples. He would have seen it so many times. But at that moment, if the story is true as it is told, he was sitting under the tree, he was chilling, he was very peaceful. He saw one apple fall down, and at that moment, his mind, his intuition was so clear that he did not just see the apple fall, he also saw that there is a principle behind it that is causing this apple to fall. And then he was able to work it out as what we now know as the law of gravity in physics. And because he was able to do that, now any of us can use that, and people are using it. So in the similar way, not exactly same, you could say that he was the rishi of the law of gravity, because he didn't create gravity, he didn't invent it, but he was able to perceive it so clearly and then share it in such a way that we can use it. Now, of course, in the Vedic scriptures also, they talk about gravity and all that already. That's a different thing. But the point is that the rishis were able to perceive these mantras in that state of meditation where they say, okay, these sounds have this kind of impact, definite specific impact on our body, on our mind, on the environment. And they shared that. And the beauty is that they said, okay, there is one universal consciousness or one substratum of this creation, but there are all kinds of vibrations. Now, if you look at string theory also, it's vibration, it's energy that is vibrating in so many ways. So these natural forces or these universal cosmic energies, they call it devatas. So they say a mantra invokes a certain energy or resonates with a certain frequency, and they call it a devata. And then you can have Ganesha, or you can have Shiva, or there are so many. And then usually I explain a little bit about Ganesha, for example, that at some point they started.
I'm just going to stop it right here. I haven't heard explanations of mantra in this way. It feels pretty fascinating that basically the devata, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm just repeating what he's saying, I'm just curious if I'm interpreting it correctly, is just getting you on a frequency of that energy that is like responsible for, like he says, Ganesha, she's connected to luck and I think good fortune. So if that's what it is, let me know if I'm correct in this assumption or what he's saying is actually correct. Thank you.
Depicting these devatas, because it became a little difficult for people to relate to something as abstract as a cosmic energy. In the ancient days, they had yagyashalas. They used to worship with mantras. They didn't have all the murtis and everything yet. The temples, the mandirs as we see it now, in those days, it was not the same. The rishis had yagyashalas. But then at some point for people, it became very abstract, not just a mantra. So they said, okay, how to make a visual depiction of what this energy does? So if we say Ganesha, elephant head, well, one of the reasons is because it gives you that knowledge, awareness, that full awareness, all this knowledge. So to put all that knowledge and awareness, you need a very big head. Otherwise, it doesn't fit. Now, what's the biggest head you could find? Okay, elephant. No, there's no animal that was walking. Dinosaurs were gone already. So what has the biggest head? Okay, elephant. And there are many things, like it has a trunk, right? Ganesha has an elephant head has a trunk. And that has two functions. It's a karmendriya. It is something with which you can grasp, you can act, organ of action. It's also a jnanendriya. It's something with which you can perceive, you can gain knowledge. So where action and knowledge come together, move together, that is one of the things that Ganesha symbolizes. Because if you want to prevent obstacles or problems, or you want to resolve them, solve them, you need to have the right knowledge of what is the problem, what is the solution, but you also need to act. Because there are many people who know how things should be. They can keep complaining, government should do this, people should do that, but sitting at home and having all this knowledge is no good if you don't act. And some people will be very active, but if they don't have the right knowledge how to go about it, you can, overthrow a dictator, but if there's no plan B, you get chaos, the situation becomes worse. So then you can explain to people that, okay, for example, if we make it very simple, Ganesha or Ganapati is that energy or the mantra that kindles this quality in you where you get the broader understanding, the knowledge, as well as the right action to overcome your problems or to prevent them. So we've just touched upon a few things, but that way I explained that, they had a beautiful way to depict it. So all these descriptions, and you've had podcasts with people who've spoken about it in detail, how even different forms of Ganapati, for example, represent specific aspects, whether he is standing, sitting, lying down, you have a Shakti Ganapati and so many things. And each of them is like a visual, you can say, user manual for those.
What is a Shakti Ganapati? What does he mean exactly? Let me know.
Specific mantras that those have been at least taught a little bit about these things just by seeing the description or hearing the description. Then, he's holding this kind of weapon, or he's sitting on this kind of vahana, vehicle, or he's having this kind of dress. They know exactly, okay, so this mantra can be used for this and this and this. This is what it will do.
Did the deities come first or the mantras?
So the thing is, the mantra is the deity. It is the energy. And the forms is what was revealed to the rishis. That's how they depicted it. But basically, because they say the devatas, they have a mantra sharira. Their body is the mantra. And in the Vedas, there is a nice story also where at some point they covered themselves with chandas, with the rhythm for the Vedic mantras, the intonation, because they wanted to hide from death. But then death is very smart. But the point there is that if you don't know the proper intonation, pronunciation, you cannot see the devata. No? That makes it complete. So the mantra, yes, the pronunciation has to be proper, the intonation has to be proper. Then you get access to those energies. But then in the West, I tell people, so there are these different energies, and we can use it for different purposes. And the beauty is that then usually one of the mantras that I feel is both very accessible and at the same time, which is very potent, is Om Namah Shivaya. So I explain.
Okay, I'm going to pause it here. What I'm just wondering right now, and for those of you that maybe understand a bit more of a Western spirituality, if you like, or, we have archangels and there are different levels of like these celestial beings. I wonder if, I might be completely wrong, this is why I'm asking, if your devatas are somehow like similar to archangels, because archangels are the big energy. If it's not just by any chance like a name for the same thing, although I don't recall that we have name like mantras for archangels. I don't know that for angels and the celestial beings, or even for like an angel, you have Angel Michael, Metatron, and so on and so forth. And I know that when you, apparently, I haven't really been practicing this, but when you name the like an angel's name or archangel's name many, like 3 times, you're forcing them actually to come and help you. And I've heard from different people that you shouldn't actually be doing that, like repeating the name 3 times. It's kind of like you invoke them. And I wonder if there are some similarities or it's completely different. Any of you would be happy for kind of any points of views, ideas on that in the comments.
Into them some of the benefits of the mantra, how they can chant it, and then we chant together 108 times. Actually make them do that. And then
Can you talk about the mantra?
Yeah. And then, but then they get the experience. No, it's amazing. So what I usually explain to them is that, okay, why this mantra is so useful. And I go a little bit into Ayurveda, into Jyotish, into Vastu Shastra, because namah, shivaya, these 5 sounds are connected to the 5 aspects of Shiva that are known as the Pancha Brahma, his 5 faces. And these 5 forms of Shiva, they are called Sadyojata, Vamadeva, Aghora, Tatpurusha, and Ishana. Now, each of these aspects of Lord Shiva governs one of the elements, the Pancha Mahabhuta, that this creation is made up of. So I tell them that from the Vedic perspective, one way to look at this creation is that it is made up of these 5 elements in subtle form, combinations, permutations, including our body and mind. And these forms of Shiva are the Adhisthata, the ones that rule it. So through this mantra, what we do, we invoke these different aspects of Shiva, their blessing, who govern these elements, to balance it. And we add Om. Om is the sound of creation, the vibration of consciousness itself. So then you align those 5 elements with consciousness, it brings a harmony. So there is something, about this. And like, I mean, there are many things, but that has made me fall so much in love. Not just that, also that part recognition, but this ancient knowledge and this wisdom, whether we call it Sanatana Dharma or the Vedic tradition, or it has so much power. And I've seen that also when you want to learn these things, because there may be many people who are keen to learn, many are seeking. I've seen whether it is Jyotish, astrology, whether it is Ayurveda, whether it is knowledge of yoga, of Vedanta, Upanishads, or anything. If you have a proper teacher like a guru and acharya, and you have a parampara, the tradition, that again takes it to a very different level. Because I've seen that this knowledge is so vast that one, you need all the help you can get. But when there is a blessing of a parampara behind it, when the guru is there or a lineage of gurus is there, that will carry you. And I've seen, because I meet so many people, and sometimes they ask me, we have a conversation, how in such few years you have learned so many things. Many things, even I don't know where it came from. Like you said, something will open up, but I've seen that when that parampara is there behind it, that really makes a difference. And if you see the scriptures, everywhere they say the same thing: learn this from a guru, learn this from a teacher, because they've only put some of the things, they don't put all the things. Some things you have to get through that, but it's not just the knowledge, it's the consciousness behind it that works. When someone is giving you the knowledge from their own experience, then it hits a very different chord. So yeah.
I've spoken about this on the show earlier, but the first time I sat for an Om chanting meditation. Okay? So when you say the word Om, it has an impact on the environment, but it especially has an impact on your own body, on your mind, your throat box, your voice box, your soul. Eventually, and this is very Indian urban perspective, you begin to open yourself up to mantras like Om Namah Shivaya. Now imagine if saying Om loudly has this kind of an impact on the environment. If you're saying it silently, what kind of impact is it having on your internal environment? That's something you figure only through experience. Which is why, again, if you try finding the limitation in mantras, you'll become the limitation yourself. Just flow with it. Execute, experience it, and then come to your own conclusions.
But Om, there is something interesting about Om, because especially when we talk about Om Namah Shivaya, like this, the Panchakshari, namah, shivaya, this is what known as the Panchakshari. It is a mantra with 5 aksharas. And then usually we add Om to it. But then Om itself is called the Sukshma Panchakshari. It also has 5 parts. So from Shiva, Lord Shiva, it said first Om came. He came, it's one of his forms, that pure vibration, that pure consciousness. So you have the A, U, the Ma sound, and then there is the Nada and the Bindu. This is a bit technical for people, but there's 5 parts to it. But then they say that if you do the japa of Om, especially the mental japa, this is actually only recommended for people who are really ready to leave everything, including their body.
Wow.
So they say for anybody who is living, the mental japa of Om, 2-3 times is okay. But like proper japa, it's actually not recommended. They say you do Om Namah Shivaya, because that, they say it will cut everything. So not just your worldly stuff, but everything, your body. And the thing is, you still need to eat. No? And I'm sure you want to eat at least something. So it's interesting, but it also shows how powerful, how powerful.
Interesting.
I'm going to frame this question in a particular way, but obviously I'm asking you something deeper. Why is it that sometimes when you look at someone, you know that person is a Shiva worshipper? There's a commonality. And I see this with a lot of Shiva worshippers recognizing each other. And it's a stark difference from when you meet someone who worships Krishna. Both are positive. Both are positive in very different ways.
Yeah.
But at least with Shiva worshippers, like the moment I saw you outside, I was like, he's like me. A little sense of detachment. When I see a Krishna worshipper, they bring a lot of freshness and bliss with them. And I love being in the freshness and bliss. But with Shiva worshippers, there's a sense of mutual detachment from each other, from sansar in general, the environment. I do believe that when you chant mantras internally, when mantras become a part of your breath, they say you start looking like the deity. But what they're truly trying to say is that you're gradually, very slowly,
qualities,
you're becoming the deity very gradually. How do you explain this to the West?
Like you may be very successful now. At some point you'll die. At some point people will forget again. So it doesn't mean you don't make a difference. But if you look from a bigger perspective, even this whole planet is a particle of dust. We are really not that important.
It's really funny how he's speaking English with Indian accent. It's so funny because I have a good friend of mine living in Singapore, and she also speaks English with like a Singaporean accent at this point. I'm like, it's so interesting how, when you living in the culture, how it influences the way you are and the way you speak. And yeah, I'm sure now after a couple of years, I sound more Slovak when speaking English than anything else. But let's continue. I just thought it was fun.
We think we're very important, but just like there are so many people crawling on this planet, you have so many bacteria in you. They die every day. They get born again. They may think they're very important, but we don't even know they're there. So Shiva has that kind of detachment. Now, a Krishna Bhakt, he will have a different flavor. A Devi Bhakt, again, will have a different flavor. And there are stories, you may have come across those as well, of saints and sages in this country, probably other parts of the world as well, who had such a strong devotion to one of the devatas that even physically their body started reflecting some of those qualities,
Interesting.
Where their body started even growing into that form, where they started looking like, for example, I think there was a saint at some point, he was such a devotee of the mother. At some point, he got breasts,
Ramakrishna Paramans.
Yeah, there are a few examples, but the same way, there are such stories where you can see that when it becomes so strong. So if that is possible, then for the mind and the emotions, definitely. So to them, I explain it like that frequency becomes, and somewhere it's not so difficult to imagine, because if you talk about, you have people around you who talk about investing all the time. Even if you never thought about invest, suddenly you may feel, I should get some shares. Or if you have people talk about cricket all day long, you will start thinking about cricket, even though you never thought anything about it. Yeah. That's why Sangha is important also.
I don't think the world is in the best place, both mentally nor materially. By material, I don't mean just money. I mean material reality is not in the best place when it comes to the world. So I hope that people find healing through conversations like this, but it's just a hope right now.
It's a time of transformation, and like we spoke, transformation is never easy. Change always comes with some pain. I remember about 10 years back, my master Guru, the Sri Ravi Shankar, once when someone asked him about, maybe even more, 15 years or 20 years, that they said, no, 2012, they were expecting this big shift of spirituality. And then once he actually spoke about it, he said, don't think that suddenly one day people will wake up and become spiritual. He said, what is actually going to happen is you will see there will be more natural calamities. There will be other conflicts. Economically, for some parts of the world, will be very difficult. So he said, basically what is happening is that all those things that people tend to rely on for their sense of security and stability will start shaking. And then when those things go, people will need to have something else to hold on to. And that's why even that time he said, no, we need to do whatever we can to share this knowledge, to be there for people, because if nobody's there to catch them, people will fall. And you see that now with pandemic, it was very obvious. People suddenly who thought that I'll never lose my job, I've been working there for decades, were let off. People who had a successful company may have to shut down. People who thought they're very healthy suddenly got scared, saying, even as a young, fit person, I may get this crazy, what if I die? Or you may lose someone dear to you. There were so many things that started shaking. And I think that greatly contributed also to what we see now, that people realize that, there has to be something more. Or they're waking up and realizing whatever I was doing, this is not everything.
Because you've spent so much time in Indian villages and Indian metros, I'm sure you have an idea of what it's like growing up in India just based on what you've seen, or at least the mindset you've seen around you. So I want to ask you about what it's like growing up in India, according to you, versus what it's like growing up in Europe. What's the difference?
There's a lot of differences there, but what I've seen in India is that still, in many places, to a smaller or larger extent, this ancient tradition, whether we call it the Sanatana Dharma or the local culture or whatever you want to call it, it's alive. And it may be decreasing in some places, in the sense that decreasing to the extent that people are exposed to it, they have access to it, but it's there. And in the West, like for example, in the Netherlands, we don't really have that anymore. So many places in Europe, now some people are trying to get it back, or it's an attempt to reconnect with it, whether it was the Scandinavian countries where they're reconnecting maybe to the whole Viking traditions and things like that. But in Europe, most of these places, that it's not a continuous link, because at some point we had different tribes there. We had our own nature worship, or the different traditions, belief systems, some of them very ancient. But then at some point, there was the Roman Empire that invaded. Then, of course, the Christianity came, the churches, a lot of the local customs were discontinued or discouraged. So we don't have that living tradition like that. Some people are trying to reconnect to it now because those are our roots, you could say. But here it's alive. It's probably the most ancient civilization or tradition that has continued.
Do you feel that in Europe there is a lack of that feeling of ancientness? What you spoke about, the link being broken.
Oh, yeah.
You feel like young people on a subconscious level feel that? Because the narrative that we get about the West in general, which is Europe and America, while we're sitting here as Indians, is that mental health issues are on a rise there. And then I have some European friends who have spoken about this too. A lot of them believe that maybe because people have kind of stopped having faith in religion or a sense of God, atheism has kicked in a big way. That could be a reason. I don't know. I'm not European. I've not grown up in Europe. In fact, I don't even know the reality of modern day Europe, because vacationing is one thing, but when you live, then you grow up, that's a whole other experience. So what's the reality of Europe now from a mental health, emotional health, and spiritual health standpoint?
Well, all over the world, mental health and emotional health are a challenge now, even in India, but there even more, definitely. And I think one of the factors is, one, culturally, that people are more and more isolated, I would say. It's very individualized. Like, of course, even here nowadays, not everybody has an extended family where you all live in the same house and like it used to be, but still the connections are much stronger here. You're not just an island by yourself.
It's community living.
Yeah, it's much stronger. So there, that is much less. So it's not that people don't meet, but you live by yourself. Even when you go to college, you move out, and then normally you don't move back in. So whether it's 18, 19, 20 years, then you say bye. You may visit your parents once a week or once in a while, but that's kind of it. And then obviously when you're more thrown back onto yourself, then it depends also, okay, how much do you go out and meet people? How much do you interact? But also the spiritual aspect or the religious aspect, it may differ a little from country to country. But for example, in the Netherlands, I think hardly anybody is really religious, in the sense, like, if you say when I was in high school, how many of the people in my class of 30 people would go to church even once in a while? Maybe one.
Really?
And that's all because their parents would take them, and they're not interested. So churches, for example, are empty.
But what's the sense of God then?
So the thing is, it's not that people are like total atheist or, they just want to, have food, make merry, and that's it. But I would say there is definitely a large growing sense of, you can say, spirituality. So it's not that people are not exploring, but there definitely has become, there's a bit of a vacuum, or that people are aware of, they're trying to fill. It's just that the old ways of religion, whatever was there, cannot cater to it anymore, because they feel, okay, even if some guy is talking something there, he doesn't have an experience. If I want to read some book, whether it's a scripture or something else, I can do that at home. So why would I go and sit there? So that disconnect is there. Like, it's not the same. But here, for example, sometimes even like youth come to me and they have an interest. They have the big questions, actually more maybe than even before. So they want to know, okay, who am I? What is all this? Why am I here? What is the purpose of life? What is this creation? But then if their parents or grandparents will tell them, come, you have to come to the mandir. And then if they ask, okay, but then what is the point? Why should I break one coconut? Now, if their family cannot give satisfactory answers, it's natural for them to say that, kya fayda yaar, no? Why should I do that? I will explore in my own way, because I want to know. So there also, if you see, whether it is yoga, whether it's meditation, whether it's ayahuasca, or whether it is, people doing some program on mindfulness, or they want to learn more about chakras or Buddhism, or like, there is a lot of interest. And with pandemic, that spiked even more, So many people, they are asking these questions. They want to know. They want to know, okay, who am I, or what is this, or I'm not just this body, or maybe not even just these thoughts and these emotions. So that's very strong. But yeah, from a religion perspective, that is not really being catered to.
Maybe different geographies have different impacts on your thought process. That's one thing I truly believe. I feel like if you're in this land called India, like this subcontinent, your head automatically trails to deeper thoughts like the universe or God. And a lot of Indians don't understand that until they actually go abroad and understand the difference between energies of lands.
Definitely. See, a place has its own energy and vibration, whether you take a local place or an entire country. And I know so many people from, not just from Europe, from other parts of the world, who have shared this with me or agree with me when I said that, you can say, okay, when you come to Delhi, maybe the air is not as fresh as it may be in Switzerland. There will be some pollution. It may be more noisy. I mean, it will be more noisy. Sometimes it may not be as clean or as organized, but still, the moment you get off the plane and you come there, on a subtle level, something feels so much lighter. So that subtle air or environment or space, whatever you want to call it, is so much lighter, like you said. And the thing is, I remember once someone asked my master about, something around this topic. And he said, because for thousands of years, so much of mantras have been chanted in this land. And, you've had the rishis and everything, that even today, on the subtle level, there is so much of energy here. And he said, that's why in India, people don't feel so much like going to the beach. Because if you see abroad, people love going to the beach. Why? Because that salty water, on a subtle level, it clears your aura, it clears your mind. So you feel lighter. People go to the sea to feel lighter. But here, because that energy is so strong everywhere, you don't feel a need to go to the sea especially. Here you can sit in any, whether it's a local temple or maybe even your terrace. And of course, when you go to special places, like, whether it's a Jyotirlinga or an ashram or, a place where that energy is even stronger, you just sit there and you don't even have to do something special. Even if you say, I don't know how to meditate, no problem. You just go and sit there. That place will have an impact. Like we spoke about it, there are different things that impact our mind, are the quality of your thoughts. One of them is the place. So a good place will have a very positive impact.
Okay, I will try to pause it here because we are running around 30-minute mark right now. I'm actually thoroughly enjoying this because I don't think that, I've seen a variety of videos, but this puts certain things into context. Like, I have a couple of notes, you guys. So when he was talking about mantras, I would want to understand, like, do you guys usually practice that? And does it always happen that a guru has to give it to you? I have my friend who is a shaman and studied for many, many, many years with rishis in India. She mentioned something along the lines that you have to, it's given by the rishi, and rishi needs to be certain that you're going to actually practice it because it somehow can backfire on them. So I'm curious to know what you guys have to say about that, and also if you usually practice mantras. It was interesting also to know that these mantras may impact, that if you could maybe any of you elaborate in the comments what that means, that you start looking at Shiva, and what is it about that you recognize about one another. That was pretty fascinating. Now that I'm going to India, maybe I'm going to pick up one. Just I'm very curious about that. I've never really explored mantras. I've done, like when they talked about Om, I'm very about it. It's the sound of creation. I used to do Om meditations, but then I stopped. But it's been years now, like almost a decade since I've done this type of a meditation. But I might need to go back to it. This is pretty fascinating. So when he was talking about we're living in times of transformation, and I think that then fled into Europe. So I do agree with him. He actually comes from the Western Europe, from the colonial Europe, if you like, and to extent I've really like, and this is I'm very happy that he's talking the way he's talking, because when you guys talking about Christianity and trying to make it that or here, like we had many conversations that Christianity over in India is very different, that it's in the West, and I just really wanted to be super clear. In fact, someone wrote a really great comment on this one. It feels like Christianity 300 years ago for us. This is why I don't relate to the things that you guys say. And the reason why I don't relate is because, as he's actually here pointing out, the religion is really dying out, and that is the reality. I'm sure that in the West of Europe, it has been on the decline for way longer than it has been in the region where I'm from. So Slovakia is very Catholic. There are still many people here that go and keep to those traditions. They go to church. Poland is exceptionally Catholic. They are so Catholic. Even their policies reflect that. To me, I would even call them extremists of when it comes to religion. Czechs are total atheists. I think that Slovaks, even though it's Catholic country, it's really dying. It's very visible. I don't know much about Hungarians there. I feel like my Hungarians might be more spiritual than anything else. They're more, I think, from the branches of Lutheranism, like their Calvinism. I think is maybe their main religion. I'm not 100% sure, but I felt like, because I lived in Budapest, and I felt like there is a more sense of esoteric and spiritual rather than anything else. So yeah, spirit, like the religion, again, I'll be blunt, no one really cares, so when you come to my channel, keep shouting about Christianity, I'm like, in the real world, no one gives two flying Fs about it, if I'm putting it that harshly. But as he was correctly saying, people are seeking spirituality, and it's very, very visible. And I think this is where, like he's talking about yoga, meditation, mindfulness. So, I try to, clung so many things under the word spirituality. I think it means different things for different people, but it's just, I guess in this context, way of, getting people back to who am I, what's God, what's the universe, etc. And I think that this has been awakening for the last good 15 years. There has been huge shifts to people exploring the Eastern traditions, if you like, and people prefer that a bit more than going to church. Can you blame them? So that's very, I think, very important. And he was talking about the mental health issues. Yes, it's on the rise. He also mentioned that it's also happening in India. Obviously, I have no knowledge of that in India. Here it's crazy, kids, suicides. My point of view on this one is Western world for sure. What he was Western world. You see, like you define even me as Western world, but I don't see myself like that, right? Like we need to be a bit more specific here. Western Europe, yes, the family ties are definitely not that strong. From the Central European point of view and the way he was describing the living, yes, I've seen it in, let's say, in the UK. So it wouldn't surprise me if this, concerns France and like Spain, Portugal, Netherlands, and maybe countries of Benelux. But in Central Europe, like especially in Slovakia, I think like capital is always very different to the rest of the country. And in Slovakia, it's very, very family orientated. It's very family. Everyone loves their loves or doesn't, I don't know, their family. So I think Slovakia is very traditional in that manner. Like literally, if I would describe Slovak people, they just want to do a job, they just want to do a tick box, and they just want to run to their mom or to their family so they can enjoy a nice lunch and a cake. That's my idea of Slovak people. But yeah, and kids still, like, you can live with your parents until the age of 40 now. In the West, it's perhaps more individualized, and obviously here you have instances of that. I don't think that, yeah, you move out with university. I've studied since I was at a high school in a different town to my hometown. So I've been away for a really long time. And with COVID, I moved back with my parents, and it was amazing because I just, for all those years that I missed out, I felt so good being with my parents. But I think it's normal. It's not something unusual. I think it's important to have also your individuality. I know that in India, perhaps it doesn't happen. I've heard you don't have a concept of privacy, which in my head, it's incomprehensible. Because I feel like everyone needs their own space, especially when you even think about like the types of people we are. We're extroverts, introverts. It's like scientifically proven. You draw energy from different interactions. Nothing wrong with that. So yes, you want to have your space because yes, we can love our families, but families in the West, we say that friends are our families. Like we choose people because you are connected to some by blood, but some families can be really horrible to you and very toxic and really bad for your well-being. And just being stuck with a family when it leads you to being suicidal. I mean, I don't know if Indians think that this is the best way of doing things. Perhaps, like I don't know the culture and I don't know how you handle things. But in the West, we are very strongly against that. We, as much as you can, you may love your mom and she may be the best person in the whole universe, but you also want to have your personal space. You want to have your space to grow and learn. And I don't personally think there is anything particularly wrong with that. I think it's all about like everything in life. It's about balance. But again, I just wanted to say that, many people that, I'm observing living in Bratislava had really horrible childhoods and really horrible parents, and that led those kids were suicidal and they attempted a suicide. So I would rather have that child living by themselves or with someone that's different than with their parents. You might have a different point of view. That's mine. So this is kind of the reality here. Western Europe very different to Central Europe. We're still very much family orientated. We're still very much living with our parents until perhaps sometimes we die. Like there are generational houses here as well. So you are able to, like my parents would be looking after my grandma until she passed away. So that's just very normal. I still know people in generational houses here. So that's kind of what it is. And with that being said, I kept on blabbing for a longest while. This was very, very fascinating video. I can't wait for the part 2. So if you enjoyed this video with me, please give it a thumbs up, share, like, and subscribe to this channel. And I'll see you in a part 2 of this video. Until then, please do take care. I am sending lots of love. Bye-bye.